the baseline of if you want to monetize your work, you have to make sure that you're investing as much in your marketing as you are in your production. If you're an independent podcaster, that is already so much work you're putting in, right? As we all know. But if you are not putting in that work into marketing your show, growing your audience, it's going to be really difficult to get your work out there, to do what you set out to do. There's so many things I could say about this. And so if you want to monetize, you do need an audience.
Welcome to PodBiz, the money behind the mic, where we get into the business of podcasting. I'm Norma Jean Belenky, a podcast and media strategist.
And I'm John Kiernan. I'm a podcast producer, and we're asking the question that's on everyone's mind. Where is the money in podcasting?
Each week, we talk with podcast industry professionals, marketers, and creators who are turning podcasts into a thriving business and making the industry what it is today.
With real revenue, real strategies, and real results.
If you're looking to grow or scale your show, and of course monetize, you're in the right place.
So let's get down to PodBiz.
Today we're speaking with Andreea Coscai, founder and writer at Eurowaves, marketing lead at Tink Media, newsletter and community coordinator at Earbuds Podcast Collective, and independent podcast producer. We'll be speaking about the emerging European market within podcasting, the community that she's created with Eurowaves, and how to create the community you need for your podcast. Let's get down to PodBiz. Welcome to PodBiz.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so excited to have you here today. You wear so many hats, and so I'm so excited to ask you, Andreea, where's the money in podcasting?
Yes, getting straight to it. I love it. If you're asking me really where the money is in podcasting, especially with my background and everything I do, I can tell you it's with listeners. That's really where it's at. There's so many things that are unpredictable at this point in the industry that are, kind of shaky. People's feelings, I think, are all over the place about where the industry is headed and really how you can make it sustainable for yourself. That I would say counting on your audience and your listeners, making sure you're interacting with them, having a Patreon, having a buy me a coffee, whatever it is that works for you is really how you're going to get there. Live events, all of that we'll probably get into in a bit.
Absolutely. And, I always say working with my clients is that, you got to get clear on your audience because that's who's going to be, supporting your podcast, whether it's a B2B situation, right? And it's really a very small number of people that make a big impact within your industry, or, you're casting a wider net. It's really important to get clear on who that audience is and to serve that audience. That has been a major theme here in PodBiz. So many people have mentioned, just being in that spirit of service, right? What are you giving your audience? What value are you providing? Because in turn, that attention they give you is a currency.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, donations they would make. I actually recently listened to an interview where Fariba from On Spec Podcast was saying that the listeners who subscribe to their Patreon, they get recipes, family recipes of the podcast team. And I just think that's genius. Whatever you can come up with that's creative that way, but that, like you said, also connects with your podcast and with your mission is going to take you far. And it's just such a great experience for your audience,
Absolutely. And I work with my clients on this, and I know you do too. And you've also cultivated a lot of community within podcasting, within your own clients and the work that you do, but also within the industry. That spirit of community is really what lifts things up. And it's not just necessarily like, are people subscribing, right? It's, are people part of your community and feel like your podcast is for them, right? And that they're a part of it. I think that's such an important aspect. And you've created a lot of community here within the podcasting industries. Talk a little bit about Eurowaves, because you are making Eurowaves. I've been waiting to say that.
Oh, nice. Nice one. I like it. Yeah. I mean, you're so right. No, community is really where it's at. And, since we are working with people, we really know that podcasters having each other's back is really where it starts, right? So everything I'm doing at Tink Media, supporting creators to grow their show by working with other podcasters is just, yeah, it's amazing. And I feel lucky that that's how I came into the industry. I think that's why I'm also very hopeful. And when it comes to Eurowaves, yeah, I started this newsletter in December of last year. So it's been under a year at this point, but a community has formed for sure because there was no European podcasting newsletter before. It's been referred to as the Pod News of Europe. That's very high
Those are big
praise. I
shoes to
appreciate
fill.
it.
Okay. Shout
They
out to James
are.
Cridland, the Pod News of Pod News. Those are very big shoes to fill. And you are filling them. I think that it's incredible. You know, I subscribe to Eurowaves. And for everybody listening, all of our friends here in the industry, we have the link here in the show notes. If you're not already a subscriber and you're based in Europe or you come through Europe, it's definitely an important community to be part of, because I think that that expertise really is one of those things as an industry we're still collaborative about. We're still open to sharing. We still post jobs. There's still lots of information sharing. And you really also are a force in the industry to create that community as well. You also do work with podcasters one-on-one on audience development and marketing, creating shows. So I want to talk about that as well. But in terms of Eurowaves, because I'm just such a fan, it's really a community
Thank
that, didn't exist until, less than
you.
a year ago. And sometimes we have to create the things that we want to be part of.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it came about too, because I had lived in the States for 5 years and then I came back to Romania. I'm originally from here. So I've been living in Europe for 2 years again. And I was very much in between the worlds, kind of, working with American clients and kind of seeing what can be done in Europe. I was looking very much at the Romanian podcasting space too. And I said, this is not feeling quite enough for me. I
Yeah.
want to branch out. And honestly, it seems like there's so many podcasters out there, like us, who are really wanting that community. So that's really what I'm trying to do with Eurowaves, to bring people together, to highlight people's voices. And there's also, for everyone listening, a listserv that you can join with European podcasters, where you can share resources, introduce yourself when you're needing help. Just ask for help. I'm a big supporter of that.
Absolutely. And on that monetization side, right, you do work on the podcast marketing side as well. So you're dealing with independent creators and you're building systems, a lot of the time running those systems that create that community and monetize that community for podcasters as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we're so passionate about at Tink, and um, I think what's the baseline of if you want to monetize your work, you have to make sure that you're investing as much in your marketing as you are in your production. Now, if you're an independent podcaster, that is already so much work you're putting in, right? As we all know. But if you are not putting in that work into marketing your show, growing your audience, it's going to be really difficult to get your work out there, to do what you set out to do. And so again, I mean, there's so many things I could say about this. I could talk about this for a full day. I really recommend Podcast Marketing Magic. It's a newsletter from Tink Media where, we really share tips and resources, and we do not gatekeep, which again, I think is such a great thing of podcasting at this level of the industry. And so if you want to monetize, you do need an audience, right?
Absolutely. And I think it's about building that audience one community member at a time. I think that's really, what I see your strength as. Obviously, you have other strengths, but it's something that you're so front and center on so many projects throughout the industry. So it's really nice to get that community take from you. Well, tell us a little bit about how you got into the podcasting industry, Andreea, because, now I feel like you're doing everything on multiple continents and you work with Tink Media. Shout out to Lauren Pazell, who we love. We've also had Ariel Nissenblatt on the show as well. So it's a very interesting moment that you're in, right? Because you're working on the marketing side, you're working on the industry community building side. And, I think when people who want to get into podcasting look at the industry, they're like, oh, there's all these people that know everybody, right? And I'm not one of them. How do I have a career in podcasting?
Yeah. It was definitely a tricky start. I started out in production with some clients doing freelancing work, and then I did some social media too for some other clients, which I have mixed feelings about how much social media can actually help you in growing your audience. It's a whole other conversation. But then actually the way that I got to Tink was by posting on a listserv, which is why I was so excited to share the European listserv as well. And I just shared that, I'm open to jobs in whatever it is that you need help with: production, marketing, administrative. I just want to work in podcasting and keep doing this. And that's when I think Ariel replied and said that they were, kind of thinking of maybe bringing someone else in at Tink. And yeah, had the interview, had a great chat with them. We're just, yeah, we were really vibing off the love that we have for podcasting, and then it went from there. I think, networking is really such a big thing, and compared to other industries where it can feel more daunting and there is that sort of gatekeeping, podcasting, there is more openness for sure.
Yeah.
People are so friendly, people are down to help you. I think putting yourself out there, you know, um, why you love podcasts, the podcast that you love, also finding your people in the industry that kind of have a similar approach to it as you is going to help a lot. And just, keep doing it as much as you might get some apprehension maybe from someone, or you're not getting there as fast as you want to. Just keep trying, just use the resources. I mean, there's so many great communities, especially in the States, like AIR is so great.
We
So yeah,
love
just
AIR.
start from
We are
somewhere.
big fans of AIR, the Association of
Yeah.
Independents in Radio. Big, big fans. There's a lot of associations out there. There's a lot of support,
Mm-hmm.
especially in the US. And I definitely think it's one of those things where, it's really about finding the people that you resonate with. I really love that you said that, because podcasting in and of itself, of course, there's best practices, and, we can list off, or publish a listicle or something like that of like, the top 10 things to do to grow your podcast. Um, but it's also like, how long is a piece of string, right? How long should a podcast be? How should you market it? And I'd love to hear your take on social media, especially because I believe that each audience lives in a different place. And you may have a Pinterest audience, or you may have a LinkedIn audience. Most podcasts will have a newsletter audience, but that's going to be, specifically tailored to that content. So, when you look at social and you look at the kind of work that you do, um, what is your approach in terms of social media for podcast promotion and audience growth? And, what are some ways that you've seen other people work that you're excited about working in the way that you work?
Well, I mean, first off, you said it very well. You have to know where your audience is. I think a lot of podcasters feel really overwhelmed by being present on
Oh,
all
yeah.
platforms, posting everywhere,
Yeah.
you cannot do that.
Yeah.
And it's not going to help you.
No.
Yeah, if your listeners, based on your demographic, based on everything that you know about them, if they're on Instagram, don't bother posting on Facebook. You know, have your username claimed, be present on there. Sure, don't be like a ghost, but do not worry about it at all. So that's one thing for sure. Then the next thing when it comes to social media is, I think it can be great if you're starting off with no audience, right? If you're having the video aspect, if you're having clips posted with captions, with all of that, I mean, the algorithm works in your favor. Where the problem kind of comes in is, if I'm scrolling on Instagram, I want to keep scrolling on Instagram, and the app wants me to stay there. So unless I'm really an avid podcast listener, unless the clip that you shared is really just so funny, so interesting, so you name it, I'm not likely to go on a
Yeah.
listening app
You're not going to
and add
leave the
your episode to my queue.
platform to go on to a podcast directory to listen to it. You are going to engage with that podcast and engage with that brand through their social channels. And that's a really interesting point.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen that a lot lately. We have a very clip forward strategy here at PodBiz. And I think that it's also one of those things where that can also be okay, right? If you're selling sponsorships directly to sponsors, you have those relationships, you can build that social into the offering so that your sponsors aren't missing out because, they're only present within, ads inserted into the podcast, right? They can have presence on your social. They can have presence in your email newsletter. They can have presence at your events
Absolutely.
as well. And so I think it's really interesting to see this transition we're in as an industry from, a podcast being something that lives in a podcast directory that you go to that directory to listen to now changing into an overall brand, and what's the impact of that brand across platforms, across verticals, across mediums. It's been a very
Yeah.
fun transition, especially with, the rise of video, because video's here, like it or not. And I think a lot of creators feel pressure to have everything video, the whole episode, all video all the time. And a lot of podcasts aren't made for that. And it's important to, understand where you can fit video in realistically and well into your strategy. But it's also that, as the rise of AI increases, we're seeing a lot of tools out there that make it possible to create a lot of those assets as well.
Yeah, and make it so much more efficient for you. It's true, and I think you bring up a really good point of how you can leverage your social media community as well, right? Because at Tink and in general, when I think about it, monetizing is not just about the numbers you have on Spotify. It's not just the numbers you have collectively on listening apps. It's what you bring in from YouTube as well. It's what you bring in from your social
Oh,
media.
yeah,
It's what do those numbers say? What story do they say about your audience, about your listeners, about your community that you're building, right? So making it all a package and not necessarily in a, uh, token exchange way, but actually what are you building? What are you building, and what can you offer to a sponsor? Even looking at local businesses, it's such a great idea. If you're a smaller podcaster, if you're just getting started, you don't have to aim for huge brands. Look at who's around you. If your demographic, has a location in a specific place, look at the local businesses there.
absolutely. It's who is your podcast for and who wants to reach that audience? I think that's also a really great point as well. Um, and, when we're talking about building out that strategy, it's so important to just not put too much pressure, right? Like you said, you can't be everywhere. And the only thing you're going to accomplish by that is burnout, right? I think we've seen it, right? And that's why we're perpetually having these conversations within the industry of like, please don't burn out. Please don't try and be everywhere all at once. It's definitely interesting. It's important to have that strategy and to implement it in a very actionable, clear way. And I've definitely seen you do that. And Tink do that. And a lot of people we know within the industry do that. And then additionally, with Eurowaves, there's this aspect of the community side to it within the industry, which I think is really fun. So in terms of, your own career, I'd love to hear, what was maybe a key move or metric or even a mindset that made the difference in terms of you being someone who worked in podcasting to really a leader within the industry who's creating that community.
Thank you. That's very kind. I think it was really that realization. And I was talking to Anne from Tink actually about this and just telling them, I'm really trying to figure out what I can do in Romania. I'm really trying to figure out what I can do in Europe and like tie these things together. And then, as the conversation went on, it's like, yeah, you can really be the person bringing those two, instead of it being kind of like something that, not necessarily sets you back, but like, gets you thinking or gets you wishing that you are not splitting your time in two places. See how you can really make something of it. And I think the energy that I got from that was it was just such a push. And once I started it and I really gave it my all, I'm like, okay, I'm going to post it everywhere. I'm going to let everyone know that it's happening and just keep on pushing and pushing. And what I also really loved, that's part of this process and I keep doing as well, is just having calls with European podcasters from all different kinds of countries, not just including them in the newsletter and, sharing their podcasts, sharing their stories and all of that, but also really connecting with them directly and seeing what their feelings are about the industry, seeing what the differences are, what the similarities are. So I think if you have that kind of moment of, oh, I'm actually the person for this, it really gets you so energized.
Absolutely. And there are a lot of differences within the European podcasting market. So let's talk about them a little bit because the number one difference that I've seen from, the North American, primarily English speaking market is that Europe is big, but it's divided into lots of languages. So you're not getting a cohesive marketplace in that way. And so as a result, things are very niche.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one great example that, listeners might love to hear about if they don't know about it yet is WePod, which is a project that just completed. It's 2 years, but it just did such great work. It did cross-border productions between different media organizations and, between Italy, Spain, just so many different places.
Yeah,
Resources. I went to a podcasting academy in March in Milan that was great and brought people together. So there are really ways that you can make it happen. And, European grants are a great advantage for this. They are a great resource.
absolutely. I think
Yeah.
that if you're based in Europe and you can apply for those European grants, it's definitely something that will help build community and share a lot of the storytelling and production that's going on here to fund great shows and to fund great creators. We've definitely seen that with WePod. Shout out to Anna and Alex as well. They're just doing incredible work, and that project was just really well done in terms of creating community and empowering creators to tell beautifully made stories across the European continent. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And the co-productions were just in so many languages too, talking about the language aspect. There are other production companies too, like Studio
Yep.
Centa, that are just doing really great work. So I'm just so inspired by seeing this. I think even more than the language, what's difficult is the cultural differences, right? And this is a conversation I have with different European podcasters. What's funny for a Romanian might not be funny for a German.
Yeah. Yeah.
A pop culture reference for an Italian might be totally weird for a Swedish listener. So I think that's where it gets a little tricky as well, because when you get over the language aspect, such as in these co-productions, the process of telling the story, right? Telling a similar or the same story, but for different audiences, that's really where it gets tricky. But I mean, you can look at it different ways, right? You can look at it as discouraging or kind of, nerve-wracking or risky, or maybe I won't go there. Or you can look at it as, who else is doing this, really? And how cool is it? And let me try.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that WePod is definitely changing the game. And I think there's going to be a lot more co-productions out there. I think there's going to be a lot more storytelling and collaboration across the European continent. It's been very, very cool to see. Absolutely. Well, Andrea, what's something that people don't know about what you do?
Ooh, something that people don't know. Um, Depends on which people we're talking about, but one thing would be that, as I was saying earlier, I'm so passionate too about seeing what can be achieved in the Romanian podcasting market as well. So I'm trying to draw inspiration again from different European countries and from the States, from the UK, and so I'm having conversations with different people working in radio. I'm having conversations with independent podcasters. I just had a consultation today with Romanian podcaster on how she can grow her show, how she can better strategize. So really making sure that I'm involved here as well, and just bringing some of my expertise is exciting. I think, as we were saying, every European country is in a different place as well. What's happening a lot, and I'm curious what you think about this as well, is everyone is looking towards the States, right? Even when
Yes,
Europeans are looking towards the UK, wow, the UK's podcasting industry is so developed, they're looking towards the States too,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so something that I'm trying to encourage people as well to think about is, we can do that, and it's normal that that's happening.
Sure.
But at the same time, let's see what makes our market special and unique, and see what works for us specifically. We don't just have to, we can aspire and draw inspiration, but we don't have to copy paste for it to be successful.
Absolutely. And I think, we're starting to see storytelling traditions and, media from different European countries come through and create podcasts and communities around those podcasts that really showcase their uniqueness. I think it's been a really fun trend to see. And you're right. I mean, I think because, podcasting is so prevalent in the US and it has the history that it does within the US, I think it's something where, that's always going to be the first market, the largest market that people look toward. But as the industry develops, that ripple is going to get bigger and bigger. And we're going to see these emerging markets really start to mature. And it's a very fun time. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's cool to witness it and become a part of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Andrea, if you had to start over, what would you do differently to grow faster or smarter within your podcasting career and, even the communities that you create?
Mm. I don't know if I would have wanted to grow faster necessarily. I guess this is like more of a life mentality, right? Like the growth comes at its pace, and I've definitely had my moments, over the past years where I felt kind of stuck, or, just kind of not really sure where to go or what more to do or how to get involved. But I've learned, and I'm trying to learn to appreciate that
Hmm.
process as in something of itself. It doesn't have to be this transition you're going through to get somewhere else. It can be a step in and of itself.
I think that's a great
Yeah.
point.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people put pressure on themselves within creative industries to be top of the food chain, overnight success as quickly as possible overnight. And That's not always how it works. It's very interesting. I think, we've all seen a lot of that podcast burnout when someone launches a podcast and they expect to be the next Joe Rogan or Call Her Daddy within 3 episodes doing it all themselves, It's, you know,
And they probably have to stop after those 3 episodes,
yeah, and
yeah.
they're just, they're burnt out, or they don't look for help or seek help or try and educate themselves on best practices or think about their market or the audience they want to serve. It's very interesting, right? And I think it's definitely one of those things where as the industry grows, each of our individual careers will grow with it. And it's been very fun to have these conversations because everybody has come into the industry from a different background because we're still that young of an industry, right? There's some radio folks, there's some media folks, there's some public media folks, there's some advertising folks, there's some social media folks. It's definitely been really cool to see how people have found podcasting. There's a lot of people from traditional industries that just found a love for podcasting and are self-taught, and here they are. It's been really fun, and I think as the industry develops, I mean, we're both young enough in our careers. You're, I think, a bit younger than me. It's going to be an interesting next 20 or 30 years, and that kind of leads me into my last questions. What are you most excited about coming up within the podcasting industry?
I'm excited about the possibility of connections we can build with each other, and when I'm talking about European connections, I'm also thinking about Europe and the States, Europe and the rest of the world, the States and other parts of the world. I think if you are not thinking internationally when it comes to podcasting, you are missing out big time. And this is something I read about in Eurowaves as well. Whatever level you're at in the industry, say you're an independent podcaster and you run promo swaps, right? But you've never thought to do a promo swap with a podcast outside of the States. That, if you do that, then of course you have to make sure that the content is a little bit, targeted as well. It's customized and it's targeted,
Yeah.
right? So you cannot just do it with like any podcast from Europe, for example. But if you're not thinking internationally, you are so missing out. Yeah, so trying to really understand how the market looks like in other places, looking at other communities, other newsletters. And actually, I was thinking, I think this is just an advice I would give anyone, and I would have given myself as well in the beginning when I entered the industry. Really try to understand it, right? Like there's so many aspects to it. There's the beautiful narrative storytelling, there's the advertising aspect, there's, the networks, there are independent podcasters. Really try to grasp that. And again, kind of like you said, find your people, find the people you resonate with. And that's why I'm so grateful, because the moment I entered this industry with people like Lauren and Ariel, they just truly love the medium so much. So I see the setbacks that are happening sometimes. I read the bad news as well in pod news, but I'm just so energized every day. Energized by James's sarcastic comments too in pod news, and just like the energy at conferences and all of that. So yeah.
It's definitely a fun industry, and it'll be fun to see where we go, especially here in Europe. Well, Andreea Coscai, founder and writer at Eurowaves, marketing lead at Tink Media, newsletter and community coordinator at Earbuds Podcast Collective, and podcast producer. Thank you for joining us here on PodBiz.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me and for this wonderful conversation.